Welcome to 8 Cubes. I'm KM Best, joined by Lamby series. We are going to break down the Marvel Snap meta and all the burning questions that you may have. Of course, however, we're going to start with the new season pass card, Miss Marvel, who is a 4-cost, 5-power card with an ongoing ability that adds 5 power to her adjacent lanes as long as there are no cards in them with the same cost. One note, that does not add 5 power to lanes with no cards in them, apparently. Someone asked Glenn Jones, and he was like, no, there needs to be a card there for Miss Marvel to give her buff. It just, it could be one card. That would not be a card with the same cost. Like, it'd just be like one Professor X can be in that lane, and they'll get the buff. But it will actually need to have a card in the lane, which is kind of a tough thing to deal with. That said, a lot of people have looked at that and said, oh no, Miss Marvel is dead because of that change. And I gotta say, I don't think that change is the boundary between her being good or her being bad. Lamby, what are your thoughts on Miss Marvel?
Okay, so Miss Marvel is potentially like what, a 415, right? Like that's
Yep.
crazy amount of stats. Okay, so I'm just gonna get it out of the way first. I feel like Miss Marvel is one of those cards that if you get it off District X, right, you will scam the game like no other because it's so hard to beat. Firstly, like if you only you know you can put a 415 on the board, you can plan accordingly.
Yeah.
But I think my biggest question is, I don't think you should build a Miss Marvel deck. I think you should fit Miss Marvel in a deck that already has that kind of cost differentials. Like maybe it has like one cost card, two cost card, 1 3 cost card, 1 4 cost card, 1 5 cost, and the Chavez. You know, that kind of thing. Like I don't think you should like specifically build a deck to cater to her. I think like the best decks that would fit her would be generic decks that have a curve that is like kind of a split already. What do you think?
What you're describing is a Zabu deck, which there's some interesting
Yeah, if it's
overlap there already.
essentially.
Yeah, like you're describing a
Essentially.
Zabu deck, right? Like it's like okay, so you have your one big guy and then like a small guy that's going to go in a lane. Like you are very reasonably able to have a lane that's like, Korg, Zabu, Darkhawk, right? That's a lane that'll get a buff from Miss Marvel. You could have another
Yeah.
lane that's like Jeff Iron Lad Chavez. That's a lane that
Mm-hmm.
can get a buff from Miss Marvel. Like stuff like that, right? Like you can do it in Darkhawk, and I think that's likely to be the place where I would want to play with her the most.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think really holds her back as a card, and that will hold her back from being a like dominant meta force, is that ongoing is a really easy ability to interact with. There are
Yeah.
multiple ways to interact with ongoing profitably between Enchantress, Rogue, and even Echo. Like there's a lot of things you can do to deal with a potential Miss Marvel. Echo actually, like, because like the basic thing with Miss Marvel you see is you're like, all right, if I play this out early, it'll get Rogued or Enchantress, right? And so you save it for turn 6, and then if Prio turn 6, it gets like Echoed or Eliath, and you're just like, oh, I'm dead immediately. And so there's some downward pressure on you wanting to play it out earlier, which of course makes Rogue and Enchantress better against it. I know this sounds weird, but for a 415, it's very well designed with that downside in mind, right? Like, I don't know how much better this card is. It probably is significantly better. I think it is significantly better than Omega Red, right? But it's kind of the same thing, right? Like when you look at Omega Red, it's a 4/5 that can give, decent power to other lanes. Like this Miss Marvel's a little bit better, probably the conditions a little bit easier to hit, a little more in your control, and that's good. And so I think that we're looking at somewhere like for a 415, this is an extremely balanced card. And I know that's a little bit of a weird thing to say, but like, yeah, for as far as overstated guys go, I mean, like the same way that Werewolf is a little more balanced than Elsa, it's kind of like that. This is a little more balanced than Werewolf, just looking at it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, after we've seen the previous season pass card, aka Elsa, I think everything is gonna be a little bit more balanced than that. Also, I think this is my prediction, which is like people are gonna like post like Miss Marvel deck is OP whatever on like the first day, but I feel like Miss Marvel, a card like Miss Marvel, you wait 48 hours and people will start to realize that you will start to realize that like it's extremely telegraphed, right? Because like
Yep.
almost always you want it to go down the middle, almost always, and like you kind of know it's gonna happen. So I feel like to evaluate Miss Marvel, we'll need a few days. Once like a deck list settles that can fit her, and
Yeah.
then she'll be a lot less powerful because I think it's gonna be a lot more telegraphed.
This also sort of depends on like, man, I really hope, like Loki doesn't exist.
Oh, Loki
You know
can't.
what's
Okay, but
better? Yeah, you know what's
Loki
better than a
can't feed.
415?
Yeah,
It's a
Loki can't
315.
feed this card.
Yeah, no, that's not what I mean. I just mean like I'm
Yeah,
gonna be playing my like Miss Marvel-y mid-range deck because we describe it as
yeah.
like it's like what her deck looks like is like a mid-range deck, and you're playing your little Miss Marvel mid-range deck, and then Loki comes along and just like yoinks it and just like, haha, that's
Mm-hmm.
mine now. Thank you, I appreciate it. And it's really annoying. That brings us to Loki, and if you've been paying close attention to both of our social channels, you'll notice that we have two different builds of Loki. Both of us are pretty confident in it, and both of us have been pretty successful with our builds. I think my build is, I will say this, I think we both agree my build is easier to play. Like, I think we both agree on that. And I don't think we necessarily agree on which one is a better deck at high infinite, but I think we would agree that, like, if you're not, like, paying a ton of attention, super good at the game, you probably want to play mine. It's definitely easier. But the main difference between them is that Lamby has included Elsa and Beast in exchange for Quinjet and various pieces of support for your Loki game plan. And I feel like Quinjet is so ridiculously powerful right now that in basically every situation other than a strict mirror, you're going to end up on the Quinjet. And I almost feel, however, that if I were playing against Lamby's deck, he would be advantaged in the mirror against me. But because it's a Loki deck, it kind of doesn't matter who's advantaged in the mirror against you. What matters is just, did you do the Loki thing? Who cares? And because like you can tell that we both have some deference to that by both of us running Shang-Chi, where it's like, that's a card that's really bad in mirrors if your opponent Loki's you. But it's just like, we don't have a choice to run it or not. You just cannot avoid running Shang-Chi. There's too much strong other stuff, which means to me that, Loki's a little bit worse than it was in the past, honestly. Like, it is the best deck, but it's not like the best deck by the margins that it used to be. I don't think it's approaching that level at this point right now. And that's an interesting note as well, because I feel like the environment is just as good as it was for it, but people are now so much better at building around it. So, Lamby, I want to get your thoughts on the differences between our decks, what your evaluation of them both are, and generally, do you think Loki is worse now as a deck than it was, say, in October?
Right. So, okay, this is gonna be a long one for me.
Yeah,
But
do it.
basically, I agree with everything you said because
Oh,
if
it's
I
not a
was,
long one. It's a short one. That's it. That's
it's
the whole
gonna be,
answer.
it's gonna be very long after this. I have a complete breakdown, but like, okay,
Okay.
so your deck is something I should recommend to people if they want to play Loki, because like I wouldn't recommend my deck to anyone if you're not a tryhard. Like I tell this to
Yeah.
everybody as well, because like, okay, so let's talk about your Quinjet Loki first, which is, I feel like it's just doing the basic powerful things consistently. Just do powerful thing, powerful thing, powerful thing, which is fine. You win most, like 95% of people by just doing that. But I built this particular build of Loki, and I used it specifically to climb to like top 10, top 5
Yeah.
infinite
It's like a
with
very
this build,
specific mirror
because
thing, right?
yeah, it's a mirror
Yeah.
thing. Like basically, you said it as well. Like my build is better in the mirror because firstly, in the mirror, there's one first thing we know, mirrors are a bit of like RNG based as well. Whoever draws the thing probably wins. But this build that I built, if both of us draw the thing, the good stuff, mine is favored because at the end of the day, at the highest levels of Loki mirrors, it's a lot of skill diff. And
Yep.
also you want to give them Loki cards that are a bit more insignificant, right? Like Beast, Falcon, not the big boys, basically. These cards that you give them are not very beneficial when they grab it on turn 5 or turn 6, especially. So that's why my build is slightly favored in the mirror. And also, because I'm playing a lot in Infinite right now, and it's all Loki mirrors. It's nothing but Loki mirrors and the odd Cerebro tree trying to beat the Loki deck. But like, really, there's a few. But like, so I've been playing tons of mirrors, and in the mirror, a lot of skill is in when you actually bounce your cards, how
Yep.
big you make your werewolf, how you throw initiative so you don't get shanked, how you keep initiative so you can move the werewolf before it gets shanked, that kind of thing. So like it's mad. Like I can tell you all these things right now, but half the time I don't always do it right as well. But that's
Yeah.
essentially the Loki mirror. It's crazy difficult, and I guess with my build you have a bit more agency of control as to when you want initiative, when you don't want initiative, where you want the wolf to go, whether you want to, okay, honestly, the Elsa is like not great. It's
She
just there.
sucks. I've been
If
trying
you
to
don't
tell
have
you she
the wolf.
sucks. She's so bad.
No, she's there if you don't have the wolf and you go for that backup game plan of like just stuff. Sometimes that
Yeah.
gets there. Yeah, so that's essentially the breakdown I have. And okay, just to conclude, this is a rather long segment on my part, which is if you want to play Loki for the first time, play KM's build. It just works. But if you
Yep.
want to like climb super high and want to have that like maybe 2% edge in the mirrors, then maybe play my build. But it's not easy. Yeah.
I think the other thing about your build is like because like one of the things that really sticks for me is like, my mirror tech is now a green goblin, right? And your build
Yeah.
is actually good against that unless I know
saw.
your build is good against that, right? So it's
Yeah.
like it adds this really weird little metagame bit where it's like, okay. So I need to get this green goblin down in one of the lanes where he's gonna set up for the beast, and then I can block off the beast entirely.
Yes.
It's like there's this whole thing going on with like that little interplay there. But like, yeah. So the basic level for why your build is good in the mirror is you're not playing Quinjet because Quinjet isn't necessary in the mirror, right? Remember we talked about this way back in
Yes.
the original Loki meta, which is like when you play Loki mirrors, Quinjet's usually better just as a card because you are getting more stuff that you can then do better. And it's not like it's discounting anything super high because Loki doesn't play a lot of things that are worth discounting double, right? And so they're like just not having Quinjet means that you're advantaged in the mirror just on a basic level, right? And then you have the other stuff where like the Beast and the Falcon give you a lot of control over variants, and you have, the amount of like, okay, so you get to be like immune to a couple locations, but your opponent doesn't get to be immune to a couple locations. You have Beast, which is a good card. I really wish I could play Beast. I really, really do, but I just don't think that I can. And you also end up in these spots where I think the one thing that'll trip people up the most when they play your deck is committing to a game plan. It's very difficult.
Yep.
Next up, we kind of alluded to this, but I feel like the meta, and people are going to get mad, is actually more balanced than it ever has been. Like, our Loki win rates are not insane. Like, they're good, right? Like, they're good win rates that we have with these decks, but they're not like what they were even a month ago. They're not like what they were 2 months ago when Loki first came out. And they're not like even like, old Zabu Black Bolt stature levels or old Sherry levels. Like, this is, as far as I can tell, one of the more balanced metagames that we've been in. I don't think any decks are pushing 60%, even at high infinite. Like, it would, like, with player diff, maybe you're pushing 60, you're above 60 some of the time. Like, I think my Loki win rate is above 60, but it's definitely not at the like horrendous like 66 that it was back when the thing first came out. Like, it feels like the game is more balanced right now. I don't know another way to say that, and I wanted to know if you had the same feeling.
Right. So I did mention specifically at the highest level just now that like I was facing all Loki mirrors and that odd Cerebro, but I was exaggerating. It's not just that one Cerebro deck. There's like once in a while there's like Dark Hawk. There is that odd Thanos deck. There's junk. I mean, like, at the end of the day, Loki's win rate is not very high because it takes into account everybody's total win rate, right, across the board when it comes to Loki. And like, it's only really at the highest level that Loki is putting out numbers. I think in general the game is in a spot whereby almost any decent deck can do well. I wouldn't say like be better specifically than another deck, but it can do well. Like you mentioned Black Bolt Stature, right? I remember at that point when it was Black Bolt Stature pre-nerf, like it's like the whole world was playing the Black Bolt Stature Zabu package, and it was just easy wins, right? If against decks that are not playing that.
It's
so
I don't know. That deck was so weird because like it in retrospect, it's like you look at it and you're like, this wasn't that broken, but also you'd win every game, but you'd win every game by only like 5 points, right?
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair, but it's easy stats and it's easy to pilot, and it's like you draw the broken card and that's it. Like you draw the Zabu into the Black Bolt Stature, that's it, right? You just put the points, and if everyone is doing the same thing, the one that draws it more just wins. So like with I don't want to keep talking about Loki, but like with Loki, even if you draw the God Hand, the better player with the God Hand will win more often than not. So yeah.
Moving on to some of the idiosyncrasies of high ladder gameplay. One of the things that I've noticed is that there is a degree to which high ladder gameplay is a bubble, right? Like, we are really only playing a pool of I guess on each server it's probably about 1,000 potential people at any given time,
Or
and
less. Yeah.
that is that is a real thing. I personally do not like meta game against specific people that I see. I just don't see the value in that. But I do totally understand why, like I try to take like a more aggregate look at the metagame, but I do know that people do that, right? And I think that there are some little nuances to high ladder gameplay that what I worry about is like, we talk about stuff that works in high ladder and then that doesn't necessarily trickle down. And I think the Loki conversation that we had earlier is like worth talking about because when you go look at the win rates on Untapped for our two separate builds of Loki, the win rate for my deck is higher, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better. It just means more people can play it profitably, right? Like your deck is a lot harder to use. And so I like the fact that its win rate is not just lower, but like it was like 3 or 4% lower. And I don't think that's right. Like I would not say that. I think they're like roughly side grades, if anything, right? I like if anything, it's a side grade, right? And but like just the fact that the build with Quinjet is easier to play than the build with Falcon Beast can affect how stats look on the other end. And I think what that represents is like there are some decks, and I think Loki is definitely one of them, that are just not going to be played to their full potential outside of the top end of Infinite. And that's weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, high ladder is very interesting, not just because of that, right? Like, I feel like
Yes.
I think we can talk about this, but it might not be relevant to most people. But like, I do think that if you intend to climb the ladder, you'll start noticing some of like these nuances as well. Like, I want to talk a
Yep.
bit about the whole cube rate, the snap
Yes.
points thing, the
Oh
snap
my,
points thing.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Yeah.
So basically, if you guys did not know already, I'm currently like ranked top 5 on the ladder right now, and every 8 cuba I win is 22. Every 8 cuba I lose is potentially minus 39 snap points. You
It's
see, you see
bad.
how drastically uneven that is. So I feel like a lot of people don't understand why I am super incentivized to just retreat very, 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 very often when they snap me, because at the end of the day, I think the plus EV for like staying into the unknown when you don't have the best hand is very low. Another good player that I would like to talk about is like Torikun, someone on my server that I've played a lot against and had the fair like pleasure of like talking to as well. He's the most tight player ever. Like if he doesn't have the best hand, you snap him, he's gone. And people might think that's just like being a wuss, right, or whatever. But like the thing is, you just gotta realize that we are so disincentivized for staying when we don't know what's going on and we don't have the exact best hand, because losing in like the higher ranks it compounds. It's like you win one game, it's like +5. You retreat for one cube, it's -4. So like, if you look at it that way, it's actually you are supposed to have a positive win rate, but in order to like, because the thing is, in a card game you can't always win, and in Marvel Snap you have the option to retreat. So like, if we just keep retreating, we'll just keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding snap points. So we eventually need to take a win. So what we usually try and do is that we just retreat like a ton and find that one pumper. I mean, this is we find that
Yeah.
we find the one pumper that will donate 8. Like, ask anyone. We are all waiting for the one pumper that will donate
You're
8.
you're
So
you're
this
hunting
is
you're hunting for like the one guy you queue into who doesn't have a rank number next to his name, and you're just like, it's time.
it's time to duel. Yeah, basically that's what I have to say about High Infinite. Like, aside from the decks and stuff, yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
no,
very
like
interesting nuance.
it's a bubble both in terms of decks and in terms of like what you're really incentivized to do. But the weird thing is, like, okay, like one of the things that I think about is like, yeah, you don't feel incentivized to like stay and do all that stuff, right? You need to be more disciplined. But sometimes it is correct to like make those
Yes,
plays,
yes,
right? And like fundamentally, you just need to be correct more in High
yeah,
Infinite because you're
yes,
getting so much more punished when you aren't correct, right? And I think one of the things about like when you're ranked, when you're not necessarily when you're overly punished for losing and not necessarily sufficiently rewarded for winning, which is what happens when you hit a high enough MMR, where
yeah,
your losses just hurt you more than your wins actually help you. You need to maintain like a very positive cube rate in order to just keep your rank, right? And one of the things that I think is interesting about that situation is nothing actually changes other than how you feel about it, right? You need to be tighter because that's just what you have to do, but you don't necessarily have to be incentivized to leave more. It's just like, most of the time when your opponent is snapping you in the dark, you actually should be leaving anyway, no matter where you are
right.
on the ladder, right? Like, it's just that, like, at a high ladder, you have to be, you are so punished when you're not smart about this stuff that it looks more prominent there. But like, you most of the time when your opponent is snapping you and you aren't able to look at them and be like, no, I actually should be snapping you back, you should probably be leaving. Like, like, there is a lot of I guess I would say disrespectful play in most other places on the ladder. Where you're just like, oh, they snapped, I'll stay in, I kind of want to see what happens this game. Like, there's a lot of that, and it is something that I think is like something a lot of snap players get wrong. Is like, you need to respect your opponents. They probably know what they're doing when they're snapping you, especially at the high levels of play.
Just want to add two things. First thing is that what KM says is correct, because I guess in Marvel Snap, through my experience, that no one really bluffs. So when someone snaps you, right, they have something. Like, they don't snap you for fun. So I think at the highest level, it's also like, at least for ladder, right? Because you just need to play a lot of games and you need to maintain a positive like cube rate and stuff like that. It's just fine to just like retreat. Where even if you don't know what's going on, because like when they snap you, they probably have something, and if you don't have the best hands, then it's better to just leave. And on the flip side, I also think that because we cannot just keep retreating also. So on the flip side, if you reach a situation, like say even if it's 8 cuber, right? Like if you know it's a strict 50-50,
You gotta
sometimes you should just do it. You should just do it, because like at the end of the day, right? Like you need these big swings, right? You are being patient by retreating, and then finally you hit the one time where you get that 50-58 cuber. Even if you lose it, I don't think it's wrong to go for it, you know? So just identify the scenarios, and obviously like KM said, identify the correct scenarios. Don't just do it because you feel like I want to see what's happening. Identify if it's correct, do it. If you fail, too bad, but you know, it was the correct choice.
Yep. Couple of deck topics for you today. I talked about Darkhawk Bounce on my tier list yesterday, and it is a deck that I'm feeling pretty optimistic on, just because it's a werewolf deck that kind of is like Loki, but I don't hate playing it into Loki, because you give Loki so many, like 10 of the cards in the deck are just like, a Loki player gets this and stares at it and they're just like, well, this sucks, I can't do anything with this. The issue I think it has is actually one of power output, where you get some big power, but if the Loki player is going like, you know, Collector and Werewolf, they get some bigger power, and that's a little bit worrying, right? Like, if this deck had like 5 more points in it across the whole deck, I would say it probably was like, I would play this to beat Loki. It would almost be in the realm of a counter deck. But because you're so devoted to your very specific bounce plan and giving your opponent not a lot of stuff, it's like a deck that I think is maybe like 51% into Loki, as opposed to like legitimately very good into Loki. So it's like a deck that I like into Loki, like, as opposed, in as much as you could like any deck into Loki, but not necessarily like to the degree of, say, a Cerebro 3, which is like, that is an actual Loki counter deck. What are your thoughts on the list?
So I played this deck a little bit yesterday, just to give it a test, because it looked well built, and when I was playing it, I was like, hey, this is actually very smooth. So what I like about this deck is, firstly, it's not really a Loki counter per se, but it can hold its own against Loki players that don't really know what you are doing per se. Because what you want to do with this deck, a lot of the time, is like, it's like how I call it a Sarah-ish kind of deck, even though it doesn't run Sarah. Because what you do with this deck is that you get the werewolf, you bounce your stuff. So your 1 cost cards cost 0, right? And on your final turn, with your werewolf not being Shang-Chi-able yet, you play everything, move stuff around, and then you slam the Darkhawk for an extra burst of power in another lane. So it's like a final turn burst of stats where you can allocate on the final turn. Sounds familiar, right? That's called Sarah. So like basically it's a similar style, and I think it's a good deck. It allows a bit of player diff. Of course, I do want to fit Shang-Chi in there, which is a bit of a difficult thing, because your final turn is like Darkhawk on 4. For 4 cost, and you can fit Shang. So I don't know. I feel like maybe there's a way that, yeah, there's a way that you can build this deck. Oh, I have Shadow King, yeah, but there's a way that you can build this deck, I feel like, just to rely solely on Werewolf's power in one lane, and then Shang another lane, you know, like literal Sarah, but with Werewolf. It's like Werewolf control. I know it's a weird way to say it, but it might be Werewolf control as the deck, right? Your Werewolf is your points, and then your tech solos the other lane.
You know what deck does that?
Sarah.
Loki.
Oh yeah, this Loki basically.
That's kind of Loki, yeah. Next up, We're gonna cue some sad music and think about
Yeah.
our fallen friend Thanos. I can't think of a deck that got hurt worse by the Mobius nerf than Thanos. Mobius was the only thing keeping it in Loki matchups. Like it's otherwise very terrible. But not only that, the Mobius nerf allowed Quinjet to come back into Loki decks, which just makes the Thanos matchup like it goes
Agree.
from very bad to utterly unwinnable when something like that
Yes.
happens. Like you're just dead. You're just instantly dead. It doesn't even matter. They just get like 7 really good cards out of your hand and then discount them by 2, and then their final turn is like 2 of your 5 drops, and it's the worst thing on earth. It sucks. It's not winnable. And that is sad because, I kind of liked Thanos' little resurgence, but Loki is, at this point, I think it would be accurately described as a hard counter for Thanos. Like, it is not winnable. And that's, I mean, on some level, okay, it's good actually that there's a hard counter for Thanos. If you want to just be like, yo, screw Thanos, I do not want to deal with this. There used to not be like true hard counters for
Yes.
the deck, right? Like, it used to be like we had to really go out of our way. We had to play like stuff like Toxic Sarah, things like that really punished it for going out there. But now, like, Thanos, I mean, like, I've seen the Human Spider playing around with Lockjaw Sandman Thanos, and like, God, I hope that works. But the traditional like W build of Thanos, where we're just like doing 5 drops and we're not playing Lockjaw and we're just like ramping and playing stones into like Professor X Eliath, if you run into a Loki, you're just dead. And I just don't think that's a sustainable way to play, is by saying, like, I'm just going to die to every Loki that I see. I don't think you can do that right now.
Yeah, so Thanos. Okay, so now you mentioned the resurgence of Quinjet, right? So no Mobius, Quinjet is back. They can play Quinjet on 1, they look at you on 4. On turn 6, right, they can play a Blue Marvel and Dino for 3 and 3 each. That's just messed up, dude. Like it's so basically the thing about why Thanos is so horrible into Loki is because like when Loki steals your deck, they don't want to steal setup pieces, right? They don't want to steal
Yeah.
Carnages, they don't want to steal Ghost Spiders, they don't want to steal Phoenix Forces or Nimrods, right? They want to steal singular big things,
Yeah.
and that is essentially the Thanos deck.
Yeah.
Because you can't even steal the stones. You
Nope.
only can steal the singular big things that are worth anything after turn 4. So you set up with little things until turn 4. You play the Loki, you get the Dino, the Blue Marvel, the Eliath, everything at discount. Like those cards don't need setup. You just play them and win. And you are
Yep.
playing them and winning for cheaper. So effectively that is why the Thanos deck cannot beat Loki. Because like in a meta with no Mobius, this is the one deck that when you play your Loki card, you just destroy them because there is no bad outcome from a Loki roll versus Thanos.
It's so messed up, man. Like, you'd think that not being able to get the stones is a nerf to Loki, because, like, oh, 0
Super
cost
buff.
stones. But it's like a huge buff, because you
Yeah.
just it's all killer, no filler.
Yeah.
You get
Everything
all
you
the
get
good
is
stuff.
supposed to be played after turn 5 anyway. So like
Oh man, it's like the matchup where Quinjet is the best by far.
yep, 100%.
Next up, I guess I just wanted to talk about this metagame, Mobius generally, and what they've done to the card. Because one of the frustrating things about this metagame for me is I actually think that if Mobius existed, but like not at his original cost, we'd be in a pretty balanced metagame. Like not necessarily his original cost, but like if he was a 3 or a 4 cost card, or even like a 2/1, like I pitched in my debate with Jeff, where it's just like the issue with Mobius is not what his ability said. And they nerfed him as if the issue was what his ability said. But the issue with Mobius was that he was a free include in everything. And I think that's the thing that I want to really like drill down on here. You need to be paying a cost for including a card like Mobius in your deck. That is the fundamental thing, right? And I think the Elsa meta was a bit unique in that you really only wanted early bodies, so you could play Luke Cage, you could play Mobius, and just like get free points out of them. You could do whatever you wanted. But now that Elsa is not letting you do that, you want early bodies, and there's an actual cost. Because like you look at Werewolf, you need an on reveal. Old Mobius is actually like not really a card you want to play, right? You need to be paying a cost for it. So my pitch has always been to make it a 2/1, right? Bring back Old Mobius, make it a 2/1. But I've talked about this in my Discord a lot, and I came up with some other numbers too, okay? And I want to run them by you. Old Mobius is a 2/1. That's my first pitch. Old Mobius as a 3/2. Give it the rogue stat line, right? That seems pretty plausible to me too. Here's the one gonna give the most out there. old Mobius as a 4/6. The higher up you get, the more you can get away with giving him vanilla stats. The more expensive he is, the easier it is to give him vanilla stats because you pay more of a cost, right? You could play that, or you could play an Iron Lad, which is also a 4/6, but likely to do more for your game plan, right? And then you look at, like, what about like a 5/8 Mobius? Is that the kind of card you could make? And then here's the wildest one though. This is my like semi-serious pitch. I'd be really interested in a 1-cost Mobius. Because then he'd be vulnerable to Killmonger and even Elektra. And I think that's really interesting to me. Where if there's an actual reason to play Elektra because you can fit that in your curve better than you can fit a Killmonger in there, and you need to turn off your opponent's Mobius, like I'm kind of interested in that. I think that's like an interesting direction to take the card. Do you think that they should revert the Mobius nerf and then just change his power and cost around, or do you like him where he's at now?
I think that Mobius current effects, like the on review whatever, right, is relatively not good in Marvel Snap, because like it's because Marvel Snap is a 6 turn game, right? Like you want this kind of like 1 turn effects, they do too little impact. You need like a blanket effect, that's why the previous Mobius effect was very strong, because it's
Yep.
low costed card and it just impacts the game completely. On review for 1 turn, for in a 6 turn game, I think it's too low impact to be good. That being said, since you mentioned about the different cost changes for Mobius, I do think though that a 4/6 or 5/8 Mobius is not good. Like the card would be good.
Exactly. It's not. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be a good card. Yeah.
It'd be that's why I agree that you can give it vanilla stats. You can even make it like, I don't know, you can make a 4/7 is too much, but like you 4/6 or 5/8, like no, it's not gonna be used as often as a 2/3 Mobius in the past with the ongoing, because like these expensive, like it used to be that you can play Mobius alongside other things, right? And then like you can just like snowball the fact that your opponent couldn't get any like cost reductions. But a 4/6 Mobius means your whole entire turn 4 is dedicated to that Mobius. And if they
Yes.
do anything else, you might still be behind, because it's too expensive. You dedicate a whole turn to Mobius. It used to be you pair Mobius with other things and then they're stuck. Now you dedicate a whole turn and it's a bit more restrictive. On your note where you said 1-cost Mobius, personally, I think it's too strong.
You
I
think it's
think
too
1-cost
strong?
Mobius, I think it's too strong. Like, yes, it can
Wow.
die
What about like
to
a 1/1?
too strong.
1/1 Mobius is too strong. Damn.
Too strong, because it's in the same vein as being able to fit it in with like other things on curve, right? Like let's say 1/1 Mobius going
Uh,
into your Loki turn, right? I play Spider-Man plus Mobius on turn 4 into your Loki turn. That's such a sick tempo swing, and after you Loki,
good.
you are still down. So like, I mean,
Good.
obviously if you
Screw
want to really hurt
Loki.
Loki, if you really want to hurt Loki, 1/1 Mobius is the way to go. It will severely hurt Loki.
Hell
But
yeah.
like, I think in general 1/1 is too strong. I don't know what we can do
Okay.
with Mobius. I do think I won the previous effect simply because the current
Yeah.
effect is not good. On review for 1 turn is not good. It's like it's too low of an impact. So
Yeah.
I really hope they get the, if they revert Mobius, I really hope they give it back its old effect and do something else about it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like I want the old effect back.
They gotta undo that. Like
Yeah.
I think A, on like a gameplay level, and B, on like a people paid for this card level, what they did to that card was not okay. And I really would hope they do something about that, even if it's like a refund. Like, I just think that
Oh
like
yeah, like
people
the
bought
kitty
the
fry, like the
card.
kitty fry,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like people bought the card for it to have the old effect. Getting rid of the old effect, like what shocks me about the Mobius nerf is they've been so careful with those cards before, right? Like,
Yep.
this is the first time a paid card has received a nerf to this degree. It's just never happened before. It's only like the third or fourth time any card has received a nerf to this degree. And the previous cards that have received nerfs to this degree are like Leader, Arrow kind of stuff. Like
Those
it's
are
like,
free.
yeah, those are free cards, right? They've never done it to a card that people spent tokens on. And that is what I think is like the big mistake that they made here. Not just, I mean, I think on a metagame level, they made a mistake removing Mobius's effect from the game. But on a like card game development level, like doing that to a card like that is I think a mistake as well.
Agreed.
Speaking of cards that people expect to get nerfed, Annihilus is the card both of us are the most excited about from the next season. A 5/7 that sends all of your cards with 0 or less, that's an important breakpoint, shout out to Debris, power to your opponent's side of the board. And if the lanes that they're in are full and they can't go over, they just die. So baseline, this is a counter to anyone playing goblins. But if you are playing, say, I'm going to make my curve Debris into Sentry into Annihilus, that seems completely bonkers. Like, you are giving your opponent both of the rocks from Debris. You are giving your opponent a -10 void. You are making a 4/10 and then a 5/7. It's an unbelievable thing to do. Like, that is a strong card. What are your thoughts on it?
Honestly, the moment I saw Annihilus, I was like, this is it. This is it. Because I don't, firstly about me, I don't like junk decks or clock decks right now because they always feel lackluster. Like, they always feel like they had to play a Spider Woman to even try and keep up, right? Like, they had to force unplayed cards into their deck just to keep up on points because the whole deck, more than half of the deck is focused on like just clogging, and clogging doesn't really put a lot of stats on the board. But with Annihilus, I think we have finally reached the end game for now of Clock. Clock has a boss monster now. Like, it literally has a dungeon boss right now that is super impactful. And I think Annihilus might be too powerful. Like, I'm just gonna throw it out there, and I think it might be too powerful because the thing about this card is that it's an absolute zero downside card in a Clock deck.
Yes.
Like, absolute zero downside. Like, I'm gonna give a very stupid example first, but like, if you just play it as a 5/7, it's a 5/7. But there's no way you ever just play it as a 5/7 because by turn 5, you would have a bunch of nonsense on your board, right? You would have a Hood that you maybe didn't bounce back. You would have a Sentry Void, which is crazy. You would have a Rock. You would have random useless things on your board that you just send over. And if they don't get sent over, they die, which means you clear up your space. You don't have -10 void on your board. Like, there is absolutely zero downside, I think, to playing Annihilus in your junk deck. It's just perfect.
Here's the
Actual
issues
boss
I see with
monster.
it, right? Like, the
Yeah.
thing about Annihilus is it does look very strong on rate, but then you look at like how the games will actually play out, and you start thinking, okay, this actually seems a little bit weaker than I thought, right? So, first of all, your Sentry is a 4/10. It gets Shang-Chi'd. That really
Yes.
sucks. Second of all, Annihilus is sort of a self-solving problem. Oh, you gave me all your stuff. Too bad I played Annihilus and mine reveals second. And then you just die. Like, you just immediately die. And it's like, I don't know. Like, that sounds like the worst mirror match of all time. Like,
Of course.
I can't think of a mirror. Like, people thought Loki mirrors were bad. Having to have your Annihilus reveal second is such a funny dynamic because it's just like, okay, if you wait until turn 6 for your Annihilus, then your lanes might get filled up. And if your lanes get too filled up and their lanes get too filled up, your Annihilus doesn't do enough. There's so much to keep track of there. But the funniest bit about it to me is that no deck is better at losing priority than the deck that just like plays Sentry and Hood. They're so good at losing priority. Like, that is going to be some really, really funny stuff. And that's the thing I want to see. Like, I don't even know if I'm excited for it. I'm actually probably a little bit scared of it because there's just so many new dynamics to learn. But there's going to be a huge advantage toward those people who understand those dynamics fast, right? Like, one of the things that we got very good at very quickly after Loki came out was Loki mirror dynamics, stuff about the Quinjet, when to Loki, valuing your hand size in the mirror, things like that. We got very good at that very fast, and Annihilus mirror dynamics are going to require the same kind of devotion, where I think it's like you're going to have to play the deck a lot before you really get it and take note of what happens when you win and what happens when you lose.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I'm just finally excited to play with junk. I mean, play a clock deck, like, because it's an actual
you heard it
win.
Here first, Lamby cannot wait to play with his junk. All right.
No, but like, at the end of the day, it's finally a good time to play clock with Annihilus, and I feel like honestly, at the end of the day, it's a bit scary, you're right, because the Annihilus mirror or junk deck mirror is really, it's not like the Loki mirror where there's a lot of skill diff, in my opinion, because whoever just plays the Annihilus second just goes bam, right?
Yes.
So I mean, I'm excited to see how it turns out. This is all speculation on our part, but like, I do think that finally, a lot of people will be incentivized to try out the clock/junk archetype, and yeah, that'll be good for the game because I would finally want to try it myself.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. We have been 8 cubes. Hopefully, you gain many 8 cubes for Lamby series, I am Cam Best. Remember, you can catch another episode of this midweek on Lamby's YouTube channel, link in the description. And as always, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for watching. Lamby, take us out.
And with that, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe on this video. Do see you guys very soon. Bye-bye.